I speak to you today as a sinner to sinners, as the beloved of God to God's beloved, as one called to bear witness to those called to bear witness. Amen. Please be seated. Earlier this week, I was approached by a reporter for the Boston Globe who wanted to interview me about the election. And he had a particular point he wanted to make, and he had a particular question he wanted to ask. And I knew this because he asked it about 6 times. After I would give him a very thoughtful, somewhat long and sermonic answer, he would circle again and say, "And are your people afraid? Is there fear of what may happen as a result of this election?" And I said yes. And it is split in the congregation almost perfectly 50-50. Republicans are afraid of this election because they fear that if Kamala Harris is elected, they will lose their country. And Democrats are afraid and full of fear because they fear if Donald Trump is elected president, it will mean the end of their country and the beginning of fascism. And that fear is debilitating. That fear is something that is paralyzing. That fear is only making the divisions between us worse. Because that fear is one of those things that cycles and cycles and cycles until we are so afraid that we no longer see each other. And fear makes grief complicated. Because make no mistake, we're all grieving a little bit. Whether we're grieving on a personal level for the people we have lost. This past year, I lost my mother on April 9th. And I know that many of you have lost people who are beloved to you over the past year. And I know that many of you are still getting over people who you have lost, which is why you're here, because you want to find your way to that grieving. And that fear is something that the market is particularly good at whipping up. We have in so many commercials a kind of fear that is instilled in us day by day. Spreading fear as a marketing technique is something that is done with perfect precision. We have not only the fear of missing out when someone promises us a good time that we don't usually take part in, but we also have the fear that is stirred in us that we will be caught unaware because we don't have more of something. I will never forget, when I was 24 years old, I encountered an insurance salesman, and he said to me, "What will happen to your wife Claire if you die?" He was working that market force of fear, and he knew that it would work. And yes, he sold me a policy. And fear is something that our politicians do really well. Everybody is being motivated by a perfectly curated fear of the other. Make no mistake, it has been perfectly curated and calibrated to get you on side and to demonize the other because of fear. That is something which is plain as day. Social media has created an echo chamber which continues to reverberate until you are so full of fear you would do anything. And this is something that both Democrats and Republicans agree with me on. But insight is no protection, is it? Insight is no protection. Because no matter who you are, you get online and you get curated one way rather than another. The politicians have figured that out. They know how to play you like an instrument. And so we are afraid. And so we are afraid. And this complicates our grief, because grief should be one of those moments where we experience a kind of connection with each other. Grief is one of those things that everybody has to experience in this life. You may not be lucky in love in this life, but I can guarantee you, you will feel grief. And when you are afraid, grief becomes difficult, doesn't it? I have a fear with my personal grief that I will not get the chance to say one more time to my mother, thank you. My mother, who never liked any of my haircuts. My mother, who was exquisite, not just in instilling fear in me, but also shame. She was really good at what she did. Anything she did, she was good at it. She was a very smart woman. My mother, who cared for me and loved me and doted over me and worried about me and provided for me. I fear that I'll never be able to say again to her, thank you. And I fear that our country will never have that moment again where we have that collective sense of being one people. I fear that, and I suspect you do too. Now, what are we to do with this fear? An artist I like a little bit at the Museum of Modern Art did this one piece in which he kind of encapsulates everything as a kind of process. He's a Thai artist. Tekravanit is his name. And he does these pieces where he's trying to create both connection and to give us a sense of things. And I have one of his pieces on your bulletin. You can see it at home right next to me. And it has this simple message: fear eats the soul. Fear eats the soul. And that is true, don't you think? Because when we are captive to fear, parts of us seem to die. The part of us that can see in the other something beautiful, something rich, something that we need to find and embrace. And when we are captive of fear, we lose that sense of connection. What is fear? The dictionary will tell us that fear is the aversion to a danger, a threat, or something painful, a loss. Other dictionary definitions are less helpful. They say that to fear is to be afraid, is one dictionary definition. I thought, well, that's really helpful. To fear is to be afraid. Dictionary definitions can tell you the what of fear, but only the scriptures can tell us the why. Now, the scriptures are not always clear about fear. Probably the worst advice we get in the Bible is about fear. The angel Gabriel says to Mary, fear not, which is the worst thing you could say to anybody who's afraid. Fear not. That just would raise my anxiety through the roof. What am I missing? Fear not. There's nothing to be worried about. What? But there is something powerful in the scriptures when we read in 1 John that perfect love casts out fear. And this is because underlying all of our fears is a desire for connection and friendship. Underlying all of our fears is a desire to somehow close the distance with each other. We fear what we don't know, and we hope that things are different. The Bible does not give us a recipe for somehow disarming fear, by looking at fear, but the Bible tells us that we can find in the love of God something that can cast out fear. Now, all of this is found in our readings, but in particular in our gospel from John. Jesus has recently done an incredible work of healing, and he learns that there are those who want to kill him. And in that fear, he says to his disciples that those who hear his voice will live. To hear the voice of Jesus is to know his love. To know his love is to find something that is stronger than fear, that can cast it out. To know his love is to know his resurrection. To know his resurrection is to know the reconciliation that will come to us all when we lean upon that love. Perfect love casts out fear. Nothing else will reduce the threat. Only love can bridge the gap. Only love can help us to continue in our journey. Only love can carry us forward. Only love will save us. And only love will somehow help us move through this beautiful grieving process that we are on. So tonight, I invite you to listen for the voice of Christ, to listen for the call of Jesus, to listen to his love, and to find in that love the love that casts out fear, the love that will return you to this incredible, mysterious, beautiful, holy process of grieving. Lean into that grief, for it is holy. Lean into that grief because you will find and know and learn about the love that is stronger than death, the love that can say to the one who bore you and who criticized you and loved you, thank you. I love you. Amen.